So I want to talk about why Druid's going to dominate the end game, or at least why we think it will. Now, I've seen a lot of people talk about Druid and putting it at the top of their tier list or potentially second place, and I generally agree with that sentiment, mainly because they have a lot of tools that sort of kind of perfectly fit what normally ARPG's endgame looks like. Same to the Barb, and Barb and Druid kind of battle for that first, second place. I think both of them for different reasons. The Barbarian has incredibly versatile uses of their aspects because they have 4 slots, which is super powerful for the weapons, right? But the Druid kind of matches that as well. They have a lot of damage reduction, similar to the Barb. They have a lot of synergy with their aspects and their skills, similar to the Barb. And all that to say is a lot of their early game damage and damage in general, although the Druid potentially looks to be scaling really well. And I've had some builds even in the 25 beta where I was able to do a ton of damage as well. The key is damage reduction and synergy with your build is going to be absolutely key when you get to endgame. For those of you that play Diablo 3, obviously damage is really good, but if you don't have a synergistic build, you're not going to be running through with infinite energy, infinite resource, infinite whatever it is, and then a ton of damage on top of that. You need a synergized build. Now in D3, it's much more obvious and much more simplistic, but in Diablo 4, you can already start to see the pieces come together for the Druid. Take, for example, one of their early aspects, and this is just the meta builds on d4builds.gg. I have a slightly separate build that I personally found to be really good in terms of the beta. And I think it'll expand its way up to 50 really nicely. But the Earth Sign Horror is one that I looked at because this is just an absolutely massive aspect. Now, when you read this, you're like, wait, how does this matter? Because most aspects, you just get a bonus, right? Like here's extra damage, here's a different modification of the skill. But in this one here, it turns Pulverize into an Earth skill and gives you a little bit of extra AoE damage over the period of time. And the key part is that it is now an Earth skill. This is actually something that's super important and key to the Druid. And in fact, things like, for example, this ballistic aspect. When you have Fortify, your Earth skills gain +2 ranks. Guess what? We have Earth Sign Horror being an Earth skill, right? We have things like, right, Aspect of Retaliation, which gives extra damage based on Fortify. So we start to see things like Fortify is going to be a key mechanic. Overpower with the Pulverize, but also the mix and matching of certain elements. And this is where it gets interesting in combination with their Spirit Boons, which oftentimes just give them extra stats. And if anything's well, if one thing's usually extremely powerful, it's just getting extra crit strike chance and damage. That's so good. But we also have additional access to Overpower, which is arguably one of the strongest mechanics in the game with the Fortify mechanic, because Overpower increases your damage based on the maximum life and, you know, their fortification. So you do need to be fortified. And we weren't able to really get that consistently in the 25 beta. But as you start to approach things like the Provocation down here, where you have the ability to kind of have a guaranteed overpower, or things like the Raging Pulverize with the Enhanced Pulverize. So you can guarantee stun people with a guaranteed Pulverize overpower, right? So the key is we start to stack some of these mechanics up, and then with changing the kind of style of the skills, right, we're able to change the identity of skills, with Earth skills being, or the Werebear skills now being, you know, Earth skills, or even the combination of swapping back and forth between Earth and Storm, or Werebear and Werewolf. Things like, for example, these ones right here, which is Quick Shift. When a shapeshifting skill transforms you into a different form, it deals extra damage, and then shapeshifting fortifies us, right? So now we're seeing a lot of combinations, right? And that's why we're using things like Blood Howl in combination with Trample and Pulverize in order for us to get some really massive shape-shifting bonuses. And then you combine that with some of the key passives, right? And things like potentially running Nature's Fury, so we can cast an Earth skill, get a free Storm skill, casting a Storm skill, giving us a free Earth skill. My whole point to this is we have a lot of damage reduction in our kit in terms of the Druid, right? We have a lot of damage increasing, right? Things like, you know, the shape-shifting options, things like the Provocation, like I mentioned, or even things like Iron Fur and Predatory Instinct, which gives us extra crit strike chance, extra damage reduction, right? We can really start to abuse these things, but the key is a lot of these passes require us to spam out our skills, right? Transform a lot, which we can do. More so when we get later on with more stats, when we start to get Paragon points that affect this, right? This is obviously a leveling build, but when you consider the sockets here, and I'll just go ahead and actually drop this in, or I'll save this build rather, and go ahead and show you all what I mean by that. When we click the glyph socket, we have things that are just going to absolutely decimate the game, right? We can potentially run things like territorial for just extra damage reduction, although that's not super insane, but we can combo that with fortification and getting extra damage reduction there, right? If we're going to abuse fortify, we have potentially overpowering, increasing our damage. We have Werebear, Werewolf getting increased damage. There's so many things that just increase, or damage reduction. But the key is we absolutely need to get all of the kind of key pieces associated with the build. And that's why people say, oh, the Druid's going to be so powerful in the end game, because there's so many key pieces to it. And one of the important factors of this is the fact that we don't have the spirit boons, right? This is a whole class passive where we're just getting essentially extra stats or extra key abilities. Obsidian Slam. This is one of the most important things with the Druid, right? Overpower is such an important thing, and if you're AoEing people down, one of the problems was that you kind of need overpower to AoE constantly in dungeons. Well, guess what? If you have Obsidian and Slam, we overpower with Pulverize, and because it's an Earth skill, we guarantee you get the overpower again, and we can start to see a lot of the combos kind of formulate. And I think that's why a lot of people speculate why Druid is going to be the strongest. Add to that some potential group buffs, right? Some of the things like fortifying us with debilitating roar, or potentially, healing or CCing constantly with the stunning and all this good stuff. It really does seem like Druid is going to be an absolute powerhouse. I mean, the ability to kind of amp up your skills and such with the Druid is one of the best in terms of the trait value. Like if you compare that to Rogue, for example, which is the one I've played the most, a lot of our damage amping, or a lot of our generation, or a lot of our damage reduction, right, is front loaded in our skills. Our traits don't actually give us insane bonuses compared to the Druid. And on top of that, we can get access to all of that stuff early on, which is one of the reasons why Rogue is so strong. We can get our dashes early on. We don't need to modify them. We don't need legendary items for them to be good. We don't need legendary items for Dark Shroud to reduce our damage by 50%, right? We don't need any of this stuff. Whereas the Druid, they need to be able to fortify. They need to be able to overpower. They need to have things that are counting as other types of skills. Otherwise, their traits and skills won't work, which is the main reason why the 25 Druids felt so bad. But let me know what you all think in the comment section down below. This was just a quick, interesting discussion, and one of the reasons why I speculate Druid to be number 1, number 2 in the end game. When I consider end game, though, keep in mind, most players, 90% of players, aren't even going to reach the end game, right? If you're considering end game, we're talking about level 100. We're starting to grind and push nightmare dungeons like we were in D3, where we're pushing greater rifts, right? It's not getting to Paragon 1000 or Paragon 2000. It's going for that GR 150 clear and slow pushing. That's the end game in this game, and most people aren't even going to reach that. So we probably won't even see people really dive into Druid until we actually get the game, because the game has changed a lot from the end game beta, which most of us still can't even talk about. And then of course the review build, we weren't even able to get to 100 for the most part, or most people, if they did, they didn't spend a ton of time grinding it out. So we still have a lot to experience and a lot to share, and of course a lot to learn. So I'm curious to see what other people have come up with, and if you have something that you think is going to be absolutely broken with class, or maybe with the Druid specifically, let me know in the comment section down below. I'm excited for the game, and that's why I keep putting out videos, guys. So sub to the channel if you want to see some more D4 content, and I'll see you all for the next one.